The new evidence cannot be refuted. We are living in a simulated environment. Every ancient and indigenous tradition, they all say that we are here learning something because we're going to go somewhere else. We are connected to a greater community outside of the simulation. Here's the question: why?
Obviously, we're here for a reason. Maybe to raise this collective consciousness, maybe to evolve, to learn faster, to potentially get out of some crisis.
We are trying to solve the problems of the world through a thinking based on false assumptions of obsolete science, such as Darwin's ideas that nature is based upon competition and conflict. We're seeing the rise of hate in ways that we've never seen. It's not natural. Nature's primary rule is cooperation. What would it be like to raise an entire generation of young people based upon what we now know to be true in science? We have everything that we need to transcend, not just survive. We have the ability to choose. And so the new question is, will you change it?
They say that the human race is doomed, that we have lost touch with our true nature, that the media has corrupted us, and that the planet has no future. I disagree. I believe that humanity is full of hope, and that our salvation lies within each one of us. My name is Brian Rose, and my job is to listen, the oldest method of learning known to man. Each week I seek out individuals that are changing the world, people who are living and thinking in a different way. Their stories will challenge your beliefs, make you question your choices, and perhaps inspire you to change. I never planned on doing any of this, but now I can't stop. Join me on this mission and make humanity something we can all be proud of.
You know, I always like spending time with Gregg Braden. The guy's got such incredible energy, such incredible ideas, and he's got big ideas about where us humans came from. He rejects this theory of evolution that Darwin came from, and he rejects this idea of competition over cooperation. And once you start looking at some of his evidence, you really start to question what science tells us today. And on top of that, me and Gregg went deep down the rabbit hole when it comes to this idea that we might be living in a simulation. What does that mean? How could that be possible? And does it explain the reason us humans are here? And I know you're gonna enjoy this conversation with Gregg. People always love his ideas, his vibe, his energy, and he's got the science to back it up. He used to work in the defense industry and was a geologist, and he really is a rare individual, and I love him a lot. And inside London Real Academy, we're doing rare things every single day. I'm teaching people how to take ideas and turn them into businesses. I'm putting people on stage for TED Talks. I'm getting people to start their own podcast just like London Real. Here's more about what we do inside.
London Real doesn't stop when the conversation ends. You see, that's when we get started. Because everything begins with a thought, and then comes the action. The London Real Academy is our global transformation platform. Here we bring together thousands of students from over 75 countries. Whether you want to build a profitable business from your passion, or learn to speak to inspire, or broadcast yourself with your very own podcast, or accelerate your life to become a high-performance person, we have the online accountability course and personal mentoring program that will make your dream a reality. Join us, and we'll take your life to the next level, together. Our next accelerator course is starting soon.
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Gregg Braden, the New York Times bestselling author, researcher, educator, and lecturer. You're known as a pioneer in bringing modern science, ancient wisdom, and human potential, who's been invited to speak in front of the United Nations, Fortune 500 companies, and the U.S. military. Your books include The God Code, The Divine Matrix, Fractal Time, Deep Truth, Human by Design, and your latest, The New Human Story. Gregg, welcome back to London Real.
Brian, I'm thrilled to be here, and it seems like only yesterday that we were here doing this, and I'm looking forward to going a little deeper and elaborating on some of the topics. We covered a lot of ground the last time we were together, and we had a lot of good feedback, and it seemed from that feedback that people wanted to go a little deeper into some of the material. So thank you for having me back. No,
it was great. People really love your energy and a lot of your ideas, so I want to go deep on that stuff.
Sure.
Welcome back. You've been back to London now a second time fairly quickly.
Yeah. I love this city. I love this city.
You do. Tell me more about that. Why? What's the vibe you feel here?
When I get my Excel spreadsheet that has my travel itinerary, and we're all over the world, and every city is good, and the people are just amazing in every city. I've just come from Bucharest, Romania, and where people just turned out and they are so open to new ideas. But when I see London, I always get this same smile I have right now, this big smile on my face. I don't know, it feels like home.
Right.
When I come here, to me, it's a warm city. People have always been so kind to me, not just in our audiences, but everyone that I interact with, from when I come into the airport, to the hotels and the drivers, and there's just a vibe here in the city, and I love being here. And it has a great music scene. We were just talking about this. I'm a musician when I'm not doing what I'm doing now, and I love the music here as well. So you put it all together, and you've just got an awesome city.
There you go. Next time we're going to get you to play some music.
All right.
So you've got an event and a new book coming out called The New Human Story, and you're talking about, this weekend, I think, some interesting practices that you take people through. And I was wondering if you could talk about some of that energy and longevity and some of those things.
Yeah, well, this is the point. The new book is called Human by Design, and we covered a little bit of that material in a previous interview, and so just to summarize some of that, it's essentially, the book is divided into two parts. The first part of the book, I wanted people to have the science, not necessarily the technical details. I didn't want to make it hard to read, but I wanted them to have the science that tells them beyond any reasonable doubt that the story that we've been told about our origin and our potential is no longer supported by the evidence. So for me, when the evidence no longer supports the story, it's time for a new story, and that is hence the new human story. So the first part of the book is the science that is showing us, the peer-reviewed science. So it's not just my theory or my hypothesis. It is the peer-reviewed science that's showing us that the physical evidence does not support the story that we are all being told. We're steeped in this story of Darwin's idea of evolution. And as a degreed geologist, Brian, I've seen evolution in the fossil record, and it is a fact for some forms of life, insects, animals, plants. Something so mysterious happened 200,000 years ago. We appeared, and evolution is not what led to our appearance. The theory breaks down. The physical evidence doesn't support it, but where I get really excited, because we've known for a long time the physical evidence didn't support it. Where I get really excited is the new DNA evidence that cannot be refuted. And it is causing scientists, it's a problem for scientists who are steeped in the evolutionary theory of long, slow, gradual changes over a long period of time, because that's not what happened. We appeared relatively suddenly 200,000 years ago with this advanced genetic structure and this amazing extended neural network, unlike any other form of life is known to have. And the discoveries are still coming. So there are discoveries that are so new. There's a discovery I can share with you right now that was not made available until after we filmed in October.
Okay, what is it?
So one of the things that we're seeing, when modern humans appeared 200,000 years ago, we showed up suddenly with this brain 50% larger than any other primate, but it didn't happen slowly and gradually. We had a neocortex that was a 6-layer neocortex. And this 6th layer is really interesting because this is where a lot of the innovation is coming from. But we had a brain 50% larger than any other form of primate, any other form of life. Previously, we had the same body proportions, we have the same nervous system that we have now. So there's obviously been an evolution in consciousness. I think we have to say that. But we are wired today the way we were when we appeared. And what scientists say, Brian, is that it appears that we are the result of some kind of an intervention, that the biology appears to be intentional, that the evolutionary process cannot account for the complexity of the changes and the fact that the changes happened, so many changes happened so quickly in such a brief period of time and all at the same time. So human chromosome number 2, we talked about before, is responsible for this brain, 50% larger than any other primate brain. Chromosome 7, at the same time, underwent mutations that allow complex speech and the way that no other form of life can have. And that's why we sing and chimpanzees don't sing. As a musician, I've always wondered, why aren't chimpanzees singing?
Right. Because
they share 98% of our DNA.
And most of the scientific community chalks this sudden rapid growth in brain size up to what? Cooked food or changing in social habits, or what is the usual scientific community? Because there is this period that everyone agrees where there was this massive change in the human anatomy or in what we know.
There is. And so where the scientific community is right now is they're in agreement that we appeared 200,000 years ago. That is accepted.
As Homo sapiens.
As we are today.
And the Neanderthals were already there. They're a product of evolution?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because now that we are able to do scientifically what used to be science fiction, we now can extract the DNA from the bone marrow of the beings that we believed were our ancestors, including Neanderthal. Just like in the movie Jurassic Park. That movie was science fiction when it was created, and it is now science fact. We can extract the DNA. Now, in the movie, they reconstituted the DNA and brought those forms of life to life, and to the best of my knowledge, we have not done that.
Right. Will we one day?
I would imagine that we're trying.
Okay,
I say we, not you and me, but I would imagine, I think if it can be tested, it's probably being tested somewhere. But what we can do, and what is happening, is that scientists are able to pull that DNA from the bone marrow, from the ribs, for example, of a Neanderthal infant, a baby girl that was found in northern Europe, 30,000 years old as her body was dated, 30,000 years before present. And when they compared her DNA to our modern DNA today, lo and behold, there is not enough similarity, there's not enough overlap. And this was published in the journal Nature. Now, they made the discovery in 1987, but they didn't publish it until the year 2000.
Okay.
And it's in the very prestigious journal Nature, page 490 on, I believe it's volume 404.
Right, but this doesn't surprise you because you have friends in science, and when you confront them with this obvious evidence, they just say, I can't compute it. Sometimes their conscious brain says it must be wrong because it flies in the face of everything they are and everything that they stand for.
Well, this is where scientists are really up against a brick wall here, because the evidence is no longer supporting the old story. So now we know that Neanderthal is not our ancestor. We shared the Earth with them.
Right, which is why I have Neanderthal DNA in me, and I'm guessing you do too.
Yes, and many of us do, not most, but many of us do. If you do something like Ancestry.com or 23andMe or something like that, we will see Neanderthal DNA because we interbred with them. They say we probably had Neanderthal boyfriends and girlfriends at that time. But if we shared the Earth with them, we could not have descended from them. So we know who we are not, and we are not descendants of Neanderthal or the other forms of life that we typically see on the evolutionary charts. What we have to say is that we actually probably don't even fit on that tree. We're probably our own tree, a very small tree like a bush, because there's no evolutionary path leading to our appearance 200,000 years ago, and that's a problem for science.
Right. This is back to the kind of the story in the Bible then, that we
don't know,
separately.
but this is the first half of the book, is I wanted to share the peer-reviewed science that simply is not trickling down into the mainstream. So you're not seeing it in the mainstream classrooms, textbooks, mainstream cable television documentaries are not even showing this stuff.
Okay, but if it's true, it's only a matter of time until it gets out.
It should be. The second half of the book, then I wanted to go beyond the evidence that shows what we are not. We are not the product of evolution. I wanted to show what is the potential that we were imbued with when we appeared 200,000 years ago. And what the scientific community, those that are honest about the evidence, what they're saying is that the genetic changes are so complex, they appeared so quickly, they appear to be intentional. And if they are intentional, they imply a purpose. So my question is, what is the purpose of this expanded neural network that we have, and the ability to consciously self-regulate our biology in a way that no other form of life can do? What does that afford us? What kind of doors does that open for us? In practical terms, how can we embrace these, what I call internal technologies, in our everyday lives to make our lives healthier, happier, more productive, safer? And so that's what the second part of the book is all about.
Okay.
So, and they, to me, they go together very well. Now, there are a lot of scientists that say to me, only when we find out where we came from can we really know what our potential is. And I'm doing just the opposite. My sense is, if we follow the evidence, if we follow that DNA, we work backwards, we reverse engineer. What did it take for that DNA to become the DNA that it is? What had to happen, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, what had to happen for the fusions to occur and portions of the DNA being removed and portions added? What had to happen to make those things occur? And I think as we work backwards, it's going to lead us to the answer of who we are and where we come from.
Okay, but you must have a hypothesis. And the last time I asked you, because there's only a few answers, right? We came from somewhere else. There was some, super intelligent being that just decided to gene splice us and put us back.
There are three potentials that scientists are looking at right now. We didn't talk about these last time. One is that everything is completely natural evolution as we've been led to believe, even though the evidence doesn't support that. So there's a battle playing out right now, Brian, to hang on to what is called the standard model. That is the standard model in physics. It says the Big Bang was this primal release of energy. We don't know what happened, and it was a completely natural process. And within the Big Bang, the evolutionary Big Bang is when we appeared completely through natural processes. That's one theory. The evidence doesn't support that. Another theory that we haven't even talked about is that we are living in a digital or a simulated environment. In other words, it's a virtual reality that we're living in, and we can talk more about
and
this.
Elon Musk talks a little bit about this.
Well, Elon Musk is talking a lot about it, and in 2001, the first scientific algorithm was designed to attempt to determine whether we are or we are not living in a virtual or a simulated reality. And what they did was they created the variables that take into account everything that we see happening in the world today, from physical parameters and physics parameters to social parameters and climate and everything that's happening. And they plugged it into this algorithm, and the algorithm said that the odds are much greater that we are living in a simulated reality than that we are not.
Because it couldn't actually identify real randomness? Is that what it looks for? Because, if you build something inside the simulation to see if it's simulation, you would think it's flawed by design as a scientist. That would be my first guess.
It could be, and these are some of the philosophical questions that come into this.
I tried to explain this to my 14-year-old stepdaughter the other day, and I said, we could be living in a simulation, and she plays Sims, and she plays those games, and I just heard Elon Musk talk on Joe Rogan, and I explained it to her, as in, do you not agree that 10 years and now 50 years from now, that the technology, as it's growing, is going to be able to create a simulation that's probably as real as this? And most people might go down that and say, yeah, in 100 years we would be there. And then he kind of backs out that argument by then saying, is it not possible we're in a simulation? Now that's one way of looking at it.
Well, it's one way. So this is a second theory that is here, and I just want to bring it back home. The third theory is that there has been some kind of a natural creation, so a natural Big Bang. Evolution did begin, but there has been some kind of an intervention, a conscious intervention at some point in the past, where DNA was manipulated in a way to create, to give us capabilities and other forms of life. Capabilities never had. So these are the three things that scientists are looking at.
It's still kind of non-committal on that third one. Like, where could that have come from?
Well, or some combination of those three. Maybe there is an a virtual reality, and in that virtual reality, this intervention has happened. So this is where scientists are today. So they're looking at these three potentials, all natural, all artificial, or natural with an intervention. So coming back to the
three very different possibilities.
They are very different possibilities. The simulation theory, it's interesting because I have entire presentations that I've done on this. I do. That's a 2-day program. And when we compare, if you look at the definition of a simulation and you look at the definition of life and our environment in our most ancient and cherished spiritual and religious traditions, the similarities are striking. They all say that this world is temporary, that we are here learning something because we're going to go somewhere else. That is what a simulation is all about. The definition of a simulation is that you have the opportunity to learn something new in a relatively safe environment that you will need when you get to the next environment. So whether you're an airline pilot learning how to land a Boeing 747 in crosswinds, you don't want the first time you do that to be with 300 people on the plane. Yeah. So you're in the simulator. Or if you're on the Martian surface or the lunar surface, these all happen in simulators. So the simulations, this is really interesting because simulations have a beginning and they have an end. They have rules that the person in the simulation must follow, and if you follow the rules, then the simulation gets much easier. And every simulation, you have a way to contact someone who is not in the simulation for advice and guidance. And when you look at the ancient traditions, they all say we have a start in the beginning, we have an end, this world isn't going to last, we're here temporarily. It's called the Maya in the Hindu traditions, that there are rules that we're learning while we're here, and that when we get into trouble, we can contact a presence outside of our known reality who has a perspective that we don't have.
That's God through prayer.
Well, it could be our higher self. It could be an angelic presence. It could be a relative who has passed. It could, if you believe in channeling, a lot of people, when they're channeling, you're channeling a presence from another world. It could be God. Sure. So when you look at the parallels, they're very, very striking.
You're starting to convince me a little bit here, Greg.
Well, but the simulation, so here's the question. If we are in a simulation, why? What would be the purpose? And one of the answers to that is who benefits? Who benefits from a simulation? And the answer is the people that are in the simulation. So we are the ones benefiting. We have to assume that we're learning something here that we are going to need when we get to wherever we're going.
Right.
And wherever that is, if you believe that this world is the Maya or is temporary. And so when we look at that, what are the themes, the general themes of everything that we're learning in our spiritual traditions, in the religious principles? Where's medical science leading us? And it all comes back to our ability to self-regulate our biology, the power of love, the power of the human heart to influence the body, the power of the human heart to influence the world beyond the body. So regardless, I think the simulation theory, we're now in the 21st century, and we're looking for a new vocabulary and a new language that has now caught up with the technology and where we are to help us make sense of our existence. And whether you believe that or not, whether you're talking about the old ideas or the new ideas, they all bring us to the same place. What are we learning? And what are the themes? And the themes that we see playing out in the world of love and hate, war and peace, our ability to transcend the great challenges of our lives, and the fact that we're not victims. We are given the ability to self-regulate our biology consciously. In a way, Brian, and no other form of life can consciously sit down in a moment in time and say, in this moment, I choose to awaken the longevity enzymes in my cells. I choose to enhance my immune response. I choose to access deep states of intuition. I choose to become more resilient to the change in my life. Other forms of life may do it instinctually. When the environment triggers it, we're the only form of life that can consciously say, in this moment, I choose to self-regulate, to do this because I choose, not because my external environment is driving me to do this. And this is a very, very powerful form of mastery. And that mastery is what we find in our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions. When I study with the yogis, with the monks and the nuns and the abbots and the mystics and the shamans and the curanderos and the healers all over the world, and as different as they are from one another.
They access the same states.
And we have been led to believe that these are extraordinary states of human experience. I believe, and my colleagues, Dr. Joe Dispenza is a very good friend of mine, and we've had this conversation over meals many times. Bruce Lipton, a dear friend, the three of us work and present together.
You guys are the triad.
We all believe, we each believe, and together we all believe that these are potentials that have simply been forgotten or maybe never realized in the broad general public. But that's our birthright. These are our potentials, and rather than being extraordinary states of consciousness, they are ordinary states that we've been conditioned out of through culture, through religion, through science, through power agendas over time throughout history. Because when we embrace these technologies, we are awesomely powerful beings in a way. Now, there is another philosophy, and this is where it all comes home. There is a philosophy now in the scientific community that consciousness informs itself through its creations. So if you think about that, what we see is movies for entertainment, art, sculpture, music, books, all of the things that we create, that we think we're doing to entertain ourselves. From this perspective, consciousness is asking us in the field to create these things to remind us of our deepest potentials. And if you think about that, you look at the blockbuster movies that surprised even the movie makers, that have had the greatest impact, and as different as they are from one another, there are common themes. So for example, The Matrix obviously comes to mind.
Yeah.
That was about a world that we cannot see, that influences us tremendously. Avatar came along after that, Inception.
Right, so we think we're the creators of these things, but these things are actually reflecting back to us who we really are.
They are mirroring back to us what we are asking of ourselves. We're asking ourselves to remember ourselves, to remember who we are and our potential. And one of the ways that we're doing it, rather than going to a monastery, leaving your family and your life behind and living on a mountain, for the rest of your life, which you can do and it can be fun, we're asking consciousness through our expressions of creation, not just for fun or entertainment, but to tell us what it is that we have forgotten about ourselves. And so, where do the ideas, who sits down to write The Matrix? Where does that idea even come from?
No, I've had this conscious thought, because if I look over the last 7 years of what we've done at London Real, we've put out all of these great ideas, and we just released a movie called Iron Mind. And when I look at it, and I look at everything we've created, Greg, I actually see who I really am. And yet when I'm in my normal state of madness at London Real, oftentimes I don't know who I am. But when I look at what I've created and the things that other people that created that resonate with me, and it could be a piece of music that makes no sense why it would resonate with me, but it reminds me of what I am, it's fascinatingly true.
It's the prime directive of London Real.
I know it is.
Right? It's the overriding you've got all kinds of things that are happening. If you look at them close up, they may not make a lot of sense, but when you step back and you look at the big picture within context, they're all supporting that prime directive of London Real to inform the public, to share a story.
Yeah. And one of my great guests on here named Dorian Yates, and again, a lot of my most favorite guests and top guests, which you're becoming one of them as well, they all tell me very similar universal themes at the end. People from all aspects of life. This man's a 6-time Mr. Olympia, ex-bodybuilder, and at the end he comes to it and says, Brian, he says, I think we're all one. I think a lot of these big themes and overarching themes, and one time I said to him, Dorian, do you think, we're doing this, and I talk about my ayahuasca experiences, and I have people like you on, and Dispenza and Greg, and do you think maybe that this is London Real is a vehicle being used by some other higher consciousness? And he said, of course it is, Brian. What do you think we're doing here?
I believe it is, and it's rare, and this is why I'm so excited to come back. It is rare to find a vehicle, a conduit, where we can share ideas as freely and as openly, unscripted, because you and I, we don't script this when we have this conversation. Other programs, they do a nice job, but it's all very buttoned up, and when you stray off topic, that stuff ends up on the cutting room floor, as the cliche goes. Yeah. And it's also, there are networks. I've had experience with network television where they've asked me to come in and they say, we want something new and different. So I've gone to the corporate headquarters and I've said, okay, this is what the work is all about. And they said, we want something new and different, but this is too new and different because we want something that's going to stay in the mold of what we already know is successful. Right. So they're afraid to try these new and different things. And we're covering a lot of ground here. But
definitely.
This is where, and I think all of this is important, and it's more than a philosophical conversation, Brian, because, some people, they say, what difference does it make, where we come from? What difference does it make, how we function in the world? And I understand the sentiment, but it makes a lot of difference because now we're going to get real, London real. We're living in a world that's changing in ways that we've never seen, that we're not conditioned to accept. And the world is changing faster than we have been conditioned to accept in a single generation. And we are trying to solve the problems of the world through a thinking based on false assumptions of obsolete science, such as Darwin's ideas that nature is based upon competition and conflict. So for 150 years, because that was believed to be the theme of nature, it made sense to try to incorporate that theme in our personal lives, in relationships, consciously and subconsciously. I'm not saying everyone does this consciously, but between nations, in communities, and in society, conflict has been a prime directive. And when something doesn't work, you use conflict. And we now know it's not working. It's breaking down because it's not sustainable. And it's not sustainable because it's based on a false assumption. We now know, the best science of the modern world tells us that nature's primary rule is cooperation. When we see so much competition, that tells us how far we've strayed. We talked about this in the last interview. Yeah. So we're not denying, I'm not denying that competition is happening in conflict. It tells us how far we've missed the mark from the harmony of working with nature, and that's one example. So we're seeing the rise of hate in ways that we've never seen, at least not for a very long time. We're seeing the rise of hate based upon religion, color of our skin, sexual orientation, hate crimes, and polarization, men against women, Christian against Muslim. And it's not just in the Western countries. You're seeing this all over the world. And it stems, as different as these things are from one another, they're only possible, Brian, because of the way we've been taught to think. It's not natural for humans. Young babies, studies have been done, babies do not hate, they don't even distinguish color between their race and other races. White babies, black babies, brown babies, Asian, Native American, they don't know the difference until their parents tell them that difference is there. So these are learned characteristics based upon these false assumptions. And we've seen this before. The eugenics movement, late 1800s, early 1900s, was based on the false assumptions and Darwin's ideas of science. They referred to Darwin's ideas directly. And many of those ideas now are being revisited. It's a very dangerous way of thinking. So what we're talking about right now, it's more than a philosophical conversation. This goes right to the core of our survival of our society, to the survival of our communities, our young children. And I think about this often. What would it be like? What would it be like to raise an entire generation of young people based upon what we now know to be true in science, rather than these false assumptions, the idea that cooperation is a fundamental rule? How would those children learn to play and work together differently, that they are part of the world rather than separate from the world? They're part of their bodies, and their bodies are a conscious entity to be trusted and respected rather than something to be abused. What would that generation be like? And I don't think we're going to have to wait long, because I think the ideas that we're talking about, I was working in the defense industry at the end of the Cold War, when the Berlin Wall fell. And so many people thought, wow, that happened fast, happened overnight. It didn't happen overnight. Under the surface, in consciousness, the changes were happening, but they weren't visible unless you knew where to look. And all of a sudden, it was like logarithmic. It wasn't linear, it was logarithmic. All of a sudden, the changes percolated up and that wall came down. The same thing is happening now. The changes that you and I are talking about, the changes in the way that people think and the acceptance, holistic ways of living, healing the body, nourishing the body. And I think we're going to see this sea change happen, and people are going to say, wow, that happened so fast, but we've been laying the foundation for 30 years.
Yeah, people are hungry for these ideas, and I see it because I see our content that we put out that pretty much can be viewed at will by most people in the world, barring China. And, you know, it's the ideas of you and Bruce Lipton and Dispenza that are really getting a lot of resonance. And I think people are looking past this blatant scientific explanation for everything that they've been taught. And I think actually technology's helped that out to a certain extent, because everything is now Googleable and somewhat explainable. And I think something deep inside of us as humans say, there's much more going on here than that. Well, I think that's what's happening.
I believe that as well, Brian. I think you're right on. But it goes even deeper than that, because in addition to all the things we're talking about, there is another driver that is at work here. There's another factor. And we are at this pivotal crossroad where we are developing and evolving our technology so quickly, we have to make a choice as a society. How much of our power will we give away to the machines? How much of it sounds like a science fiction movie? Where do those movies come from? This is consciousness in those movies asking us to explore how much of ourselves do we want to give away. And here's a perfect example, Elon Musk. Elon Musk has developed a new company called Neuralink. And his philosophy is, not, and I'm not slighting him for this, because this is the way society learns, this is the way science learns, by pushing the boundaries. And Elon Musk is a brilliant man, he's pushing those boundaries. And I think he'll push them until he has pushback from society. Neuralink is the first chip implanted into the human brain that directly links the human brain with the hard drive of a physical computer without a wire, without a cable. So it's like Bluetooth technology. It's beyond Bluetooth, but you can think of it that way. Right. So what he's saying is, if you can't beat the machines, join them. He said, let's interface, let's become one with these machines.
Right.
So
what do you think about that?
So they have the chips that can be implanted into the brain, and I mean, think about what's happening. These are silicon chips that have contact points that are interfacing with human neurons. My personal feeling is it's a mistake. My personal feeling. I believe it's a dangerous path, and I also believe it's an unnecessary path, because in the book, Human by Design, and in the programs that we offer, we have the biology that allows us to do already, we have this, what those chips are allowing us to do if we awaken that biology. We have, the chips allow, the Matrix is the perfect example of this. In the movie The Matrix, I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to spoil it for anyone that hasn't seen it, but in the movie The Matrix, the first one, the people who were awakening into the new reality, when they needed to learn something quickly, they had a port at the base of their skull, and they would physically plug a cable into a computer, a hard drive, and they could download and learn programs very quickly. So Keanu Reeves is learning Kung Fu. There's a very famous line, I love this line. He plugs in, he closes his eyes, and then he looks and he says, I know Kung Fu.
Yeah.
Okay, and what he did with that machine, we have the ability to do right now through what are called mirror neurons. Interestingly, mirror neurons are a specialized class of neurons in the human brain that don't know the difference between watching an experience and having the experience. So when we already know this, for example, this is why you can lie on your couch on a Sunday afternoon watching a soccer game or a golf tournament or whatever. You're lying down, but you're watching this and your heart's racing, your muscles are tense, you might be perspiring, you might be, breathing heavy, but you're just lying there. I mean, if you think about that, it makes no sense. Your mirror neurons think you're the one on the field.
Right, which is why we watch.
It is. And these are very powerful neurons, and they're also powerful in addiction. This is why pornography, for example, is so powerful. It's so addicting, because when someone witnesses those images with the mirror neurons, it triggers the oxytocin and the same dopamine, the same very addictive chemistry, because the brain doesn't know the difference between watching and having the experience. So these are the bad things that we hear. The good things that we don't often hear is because the brain doesn't know the difference. When we learn to access these mirror neurons in a very specific way, we have super learning, Brian. We can learn, so I do this personally. I mean, we can learn very, very quickly. We can learn music. You can learn to perform the way another musician is performing. You can learn a foreign language very quickly. You can retain, not only retain, but recall information. Very super learning, super memory, super retention, super recall from the mirror neurons. And here's the kicker. Those mirror neurons in the human brain are in the 6th layer of the neocortex that is made possible through a mysterious DNA fusion that happened 200,000 years ago. When we showed up, who or whatever is responsible for our existence, whatever's the source of the intervention that appears to have happened, made those neurons possible. And it gives us the ability, if we choose to access this potential, to learn and experience very, very quickly. We don't need to be physically connected to a computer. But this is an example of where, if we don't know that, and we go down this road, I mean, it won't stop there. We end up giving our power away to a device. And you've heard the old axiom, if use it or lose it. And we run, I think, the risk of becoming a species where we begin to lose this tremendous, beautiful potential.
And we are losing parts of that already because we're no longer kind of learning the same way and pushing our brains to learn languages. It's all there on Google Translate.
Ask the young people today to solve a mathematic problem without the use of a phone or a calculator.
Yeah.
Now, I come from a generation, and this has all happened in one generation. When I was in school back in the 1950s, 60s, early 70s, engineers were putting the first man on the moon using a slide rule.
Yeah.
Now, some of our viewers don't even know what a slide rule is, but it is the precursor it has no electricity. It is a gadget that looked like a ruler that had a slide that you could use to move and correlate certain numbers. And this is the way engineering happened. World War II, the atomic bomb, this is how we solved our problems. Yeah. And young people now, if they don't have either a calculator, which is almost obsolete, the physical calculator, they're all on the phones now, or they don't have a phone, they cannot solve the problems.
Yeah, well, we are now cyborgs, whether we want to admit it or not. Most people are anxious that they don't have the phone. They refer to it all the time. It's part of their consciousness. And so, as I've heard Elon talk about, he said the problem now, or maybe not the problem, maybe the good part, according to you, is bandwidth. Because we have our thumbs to get the information from our brain into this network, this internet platform. And so Elon is proposing that we jack up that bandwidth and get all of the downloaded interaction between us and this supercomputing, super interconnected network around the world, and then take ourselves to that next level. And so I think Elon is a proponent, or he's just saying it's going to happen, so let's make it happen.
Yeah, and he's just saying, let's go with the flow. This is where it's going.
Right, and I see what you're saying, because if we do that, there's not many ways of going back. We already are doing that to a certain extent, aren't we?
Well, we are, and I have to be, for transparency, I'll just say that I probably am what you would call a purist. There's a part of me that so respects the intricacy of the human being, our existence. We are so mysterious. We are so complex. And every time scientists think they've got it nailed, it's all buttoned up, and they think they understand everything there is to understand, they understand that they don't know what's really happening. Human brain states is a perfect example. We can talk about that in just a moment. So I think until we fully understand who we are and our potential, it's a mistake.
Right. Because we're closing off that door, we might not ever go back there.
We're giving it away. It's a mistake to lose that.
50 years from now, there'll be the science fiction movie of the people that stayed away from the tech and the people that went into the tech.
I think it's happening right now. That's exactly what you're seeing. And if some people go to extremes, I think the machines can be useful as tools. My caution is not to embrace them as a crutch, where we have to have them. Right. If a machine can tell me when I'm creating the conditions in my body to access this potential, then that machine is very useful. Once I understand that, I can toss the machine away. I don't need the gadget, because now I know who I am. If if I feel like I need the machine to take me to this place every time. So I have a bad day or I'm a little stressed, and I say, oh, I got to hook up to my machine, my PC, and run this app to tell me when I'm in the right brain state or whatever, the right heart state or whatever it is. And I think that's where we run the risk, and we have to be conscious. We have to be conscious and cautious as we do this. And I'm tripping on it a little bit because I wanted to go back. I'm not slighting Elon Musk. He is of a different generation than we are. He's an entrepreneur. He's done amazing things. He sees potential, and he says, let's explore this potential. And so he probably is accelerating the evolution, wherever that evolution is going to go. We have to make a choice now, where we didn't have to make it 5 years ago. Now we have to choose, are we going to follow this path? Now I have to tell you, Brian, audiences all over the world, when I share this story, and I've got a presentation that goes with it, and before I even share my opinion, I can see people in the audience, and when they see the picture of the chip, I say, here's the chip, here's what it does, and people are out there, they're shaking their heads. And then when I say, in my opinion, this is a dangerous thing to do, it's a slippery slope, I think we may not want to go here, people stand up and they applaud. Yeah. People, at least in the ilk that we're communicating with, believe that there is we're pushing a boundary, and it's a boundary they don't want to cross. Yeah.